everybody. Thanks for joining another episode of the PM Learning Series. My name is Shavi. I am a product manager at LinkedIn and host of today's show. Please introduce yourself, drop in the chat where you're joining us from. I already see one person, Sudahan-san, joining us in the evening. So you're probably from Asia or Europe. Thanks for joining us. Please continue to introduce yourself. So the PM Learning Series, as many of you know, is a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and product practitioners share their PM career journeys and lessons learned to inspire current and aspiring product builders like you to level up your product career. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find the link in the event's details tab to receive recap of key takeaways from today's event, as well as future event updates. So one thing I wanted to mention is that my internet is very spotty today. So I already prepared my guest, Laura, and I need to prepare to many of you that in case I drop off, Laura will be a one-woman show for a little bit. So please make sure you welcome her, drop in the chat where you're joining us from, and any questions you might have for her. So with that, today with me, I have Laura as our guest. Thank you so much, Laura, for joining us.
Hey, Shavi, it's so great to be here. I'm looking at this chat. Oh my God, this is an international audience. Wonderful.
Oh yeah. A lot of people are joining us from like India, from, Texas,
yeah, wow.
Houston, a lot of Asian folks. It's pretty late. London, it's dinner time and on a Friday. So thank you so much for being so committed. Carolina from Spain, Yash from India, Nigeria, Nathan. And yeah, please continue to drop in the chat, say hi. Thank you so much. So Laura is a seasoned product executive, board member, and advisor to CEOs with over 2 decades of leadership experience in B2B and B2B2C companies across multiple industries. Laura has led product teams in large and small organizations, including SAP Labs, Nuance, Microsoft, SAP Labs. Most recently, she was the chief product officer at TrueML and as an independent board member for a fintech company in Colombia. So Laura is a guest speaker and lecturer at Stanford and a supporter of women and diversity. Laura, you and I met more formally during this year's Women in Product Conference. So thank you so much for being such a force.
Thank you for having me. This is fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as you can see, the chat just blew up. Like more people, folks for joining from Peru, Oklahoma City, South Africa, Toronto, Canada. So this is really, really exciting. Again, folks, please make Laura feel welcome. Drop in the chat where you're joining us from. My internet is spotty today, so I do have the caution in case I drop off. Make sure you make her feel welcome and ask her and, good use of her time, right? This 30 minutes with you. So make sure you drop your question in the chat. Well, Laura, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about kind of your journey into product. I mean, obviously we've seen the resume version of your journey, but tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so I am from Colombia. I studied civil engineering in Colombia, and I came to the US to get a master's in civil engineering, specifically in water resources. And for 9 years, I actually worked with an ex-professor from Stanford who had a consulting firm, and I was helping develop software for reservoir operations and hydrologic simulation. But the software industry here was going crazy. And I was like, I really would like to move to the software industry, not sure how to do that. I thought about going for an MBA, but I spoke to one of my ex-professors from Stanford, and he was like, oh, no, you're too technical for an MBA, but there is sort of a technical MBA in engineering in the management science and engineering program. So I raided all our savings. I pretty much left my husband to be a single parent of a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old and went back full-time to Stanford for the management science and engineering program and loved it. It was great. When I graduated, it was the height of the .com era, so there was a lot of opportunity. But back then, product management wasn't well understood. In fact, in my program at Stanford, it had been mentioned once as one of the areas of marketing. product management used to live under marketing at that time. But I still knew that that's sort of where I wanted to go. I knew I didn't want to be a programmer, even though I had done software development. And I wanted to be close to the technology, but also to the business. So one of my professors, who was my mentor, introduced me to this company called Nuance that was the pioneer in speech recognition. It was a startup here in Silicon Valley. And they offered me a job in business development. And I was like, no, I don't want to do business development. So I ended up going to SAP Labs, and I actually had the opportunity to work really closely with the product teams that were trying to launch brand new products. This was pre-release products, and I was working with them and with the big clients like Intel to really bring these products to market. So I was doing a lot of the kind of product management, but true product management for SAP was in Germany. So I kept an eye on Nuance because I thought it was the coolest thing, the speech recognition. And so after a year and a half, I went back, and my mentor told him, oh, great, she's interested. So I spoke with the CEO, and he said, well, I don't need to interview you, but I just have one question. If I offer you a job, will you take it? And I said, well, if you offer me a job in product management, I will take it. So he did. So I joined as a junior product manager. But here's the interesting part of the story. About 2 years later, I was having drinks with my manager, the director of product management, who was great. And he confessed to me that he didn't want to hire me, and that the VP of marketing, who was his boss, didn't want to hire me either, because I had no prior experience officially in product management. But the CEO pretty much forced them to hire me. And he was very happy that he had done so. But it's kind of, I tell this story because I think that even today, it is true that getting into product management has a little bit of this tricky path because there's no automatic path in. But I think that was kind of it for me, and never looked back. I've been in product ever since, loved it. And as you said, I've been in large and small companies, primarily B2B and B2B2C, which I find fascinating. So that's
this is great. This is great. I love how you kind of give almost like a brief historical overview of how product management, started out in marketing, and then, growing into PM. And then I think a lot of people on this show need to hear that, of like, just like the transition, the muddy transition of like this chicken and egg, like, hey, I don't have PM experience, but I want to become a PM. And how do you become PM if you don't have PM experience? This is really inspiring to hear your journey. And I just want to say that, the community is giving you a warm welcome. There's a couple of folks from South America. I've seen folks from Argentina, from Brazil, from Peru. Maybe there are some folks from Colombia. Please say hi and make sure, Laura feels welcome. But thank you so much again. You mentioned a little bit about, and today's talk is really about mastering B2B product strategy. I think B2B is a very interesting space, right? Like, when a lot of people think about product, we're most familiar, obviously, with consumer product because that's what we use every day. But I think B2B has such commercial and societal impact, right? Let's talk about, you mentioned a little bit at the beginning, during your intro, around strategic product leadership. Like, what does it mean to you, and specifically in the B2B context?
So it is interesting because being strategic means different things to different people. But for many people in product, it just evokes this image of Steve Jobs, like this visionary genius, right? And of course, being aware of the trends, looking at the opportunities to innovate is very important. But that's a very narrow way to think about being strategic. And there's one definition that I read a while ago that I really like. And it says that being strategic is the ability to lead ourselves, our teams, and our organizations in a way that advances the company's mission and goals and creates advantage for the long term. And what I like about that definition is it points to some very important things. First, this leading our teams and organizations. This implies the ability to build, develop, retain, and inspire a high-performing team. There's no product leader that succeeds alone, no matter how visionary they are. So I think this concept of really being able to build this high-performing team and retain them is pretty critical to being a strategic product leader. The other piece is this advancing the company's mission and goals. And I think that what it means, it's really important to realize that product strategy is not independent of business strategy. They really need to go together. Now, product strategy has to be looking at how to move forward towards this vision, this long-term vision that the company has. But it also needs to be responsive to the specific business strategy and even to short-term financial goals. And so really at the core of being a strategic product leader is this difficult balance between this long-term vision and this short-term demands, being able to accommodate them and assign the resources correctly with that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love the focus that you said about amplifying team, right? That this being strategic leadership is really being about building this high performing team that can deliver and advance the company's, mission and vision. We'll dive in.
Why is this particularly difficult in B2B? In B2B companies, you have some very, very strong opinionated stakeholders. It's your sales team, it's your client success team, it's your big customers who can be very vocal. And if you are in a regulated industry like fintech, health tech, then you also have your legal and compliance team, and they are very vocal and they are a very key stakeholder. So this balancing this kind of long-term vision and the short-term demands from the business can be especially tricky in B2B.
Yeah, let's dive into some of this trickiness. But before then, I just want to say hi to a couple of folks. Our LinkedIn audience is really resonating with your story as you're talking about your journey. And I think I do get at least one person, Camilo from Colombia. I don't read Spanish, but I think it means saying hi. All right, cool. Laura, let's dive in. So, we know that in B2B, and I have a lot of folks over the years reaching out to me, asking me about this tension between sales team and product team, right? Because especially in early days for smaller companies in B2B, even for larger companies, sometimes you have this one or two or three, I believe during the whip call, you call them the big whales. Sometimes they are the economic, backbones for a smaller company. So then you ended up basically building product or sometimes customized product for them and losing that vision. So how do you dance, this tangle, this tension between the sales team and the R&D team? Like, how do you make sure that we can increase empathy towards each other? You're actually building a roadmap rather than being like a service to the sales team.
Yeah, and so again, there's a lot of this balance. And it is true that in B2B, in the early stage, the company needs to be able to secure those really key customers. And as a product leader, as a product manager, you're going to have to accommodate some of their unique requirements, even if you know that long-term, many customers in the future may never use that. But when you are in early stage, you do need to secure those customers, and you do need to be willing to accommodate unique things for them. Now, what's dangerous is if you start scaling, you can't do that anymore, or not for all of them. And that's where some of those tensions begin, because of course those customers are accustomed to getting what they want. The sales team is saying, I need this unique thing just to make this sale. And that's where you really need to start balancing. And I've had to deal with a lot of that in many of my companies. It's part of being a chief product officer, because you're at the end of the day, you're this nexus between what this business is trying to do, what the go-to-market team is trying to do, and what your product and engineering teams are trying to get longer term towards the vision. And what I would say is you need to be really watching closely this business situation, the business strategy, so that you can balance it correctly. And I have many examples where I had to essentially push back on the go-to-market teams and even the CEO in order to protect the ability to develop the product towards the future. But equally, and this is especially common now with the economic downturn, I also had to go and tell the product team and the engineering team that we were going to stop or slow down initiatives that they were very excited about, because we needed to accommodate short-term things that would allow the company to sell. So it's the balance that you need to do. And I can share you some of the examples that I had to deal with.
Yeah, I think that would be great if you can share maybe one story.
Yeah, and I think that what is important to keep in mind, at the end of the day, everybody wants the same. Everybody wants the company to be successful. And so it's really not like us versus them. It's just being able to bring everybody together. And the best way to do that is really by using data. So in one of the companies, within 2 months of having joined the company, I found myself telling the CEO that we actually had to fire the biggest logo customer that we had. And that's not really something that you look forward to. But what had happened was, even as early as during the interview process, when I joined the company, I had already heard from the CTO and from others that there was a lot of concern about this one big customer wanting all this unique functionality. And they just kept asking for more and more. They wanted to pretty much have the product work differently for them. So when I joined, the first thing I did is spend time with product and engineering, really laying out how much bandwidth was being spent on this customer. And what we found is there was a lot of the team that was spending time on stuff that was not going to be reusable by anybody else. So with that data, I actually went to the executive team and I said, this is not going to be scalable. It's not going to be sustainable. And the reality is that this customer wants to take us in a direction that's not the direction that we as a company want to go. So as much as the sales team loved the fact that we had this logo and they could mention them, and as much as the client success team kept saying, oh, if we only do this, they will give us more and more business, the executive team, once they saw the numbers, agreed. And so we parted ways with that customer. And that's sort of a extreme case. I tell you, engineering loved me after that. They really kind of saw that there was no end in mind. And having done that allowed us to really refocus the resources. But at the same time, I've had to do the opposite. I had to go to engineering and product and say, given the current business situation, given the goals we have, we are going to need to put some of this ambitious initiatives, long-term initiatives on hold. We're going to refocus the team to do some stuff that we need for retention and for immediate sales. And that's not what they want to hear. But at the end of the day, the way to do that is to bring more empathy between the teams. So when you have an engineering and product team that are very upset because now they're being asked to do these tactical things, it's helpful for them to hear first hand from the sales team and the client success teams who are facing these unhappy customers or these prospects who are saying, we're not going to close because you're missing important thing. If they can hear that, they can see that those teams are under a lot of pressure. And equally, when the executives and the sales team can see the numbers of like, hey, this is taking so much of engineering and product, and there's all this other stuff we can't do just to accommodate this, they accept. So I think it's really a lot of bringing that empathy and aligning back to, at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, and it's the company to be successful.
Yeah, I love that. And anchoring around the common vision and goal, for the company to be successful. And yeah, I resonated a lot with like increasing empathy by opening that bridge to make sure, R&D teams can talk to sales teams and customer success and really understanding the customer perspective or the verbatims from the end users. I think sometimes it helps a lot. Because, I remember if it's just product, educating the engineers hey, this is what sales team says, or vice versa, right? Talking to sales teams and say what engineering thinks. Sometimes you're in the middle and you're not really being strategic about how to increase the impact of such a conversation. So I love how you create avenues for that kind of empathy building. And I do wanted to say hi to one more folks, Sarah, also from Colombia. It's great to see such a community that I can call on a upon. So Laura, I wanted to maybe switch gear a little bit, and I'll come back to the strategic aspect. We do have one question from the community asking about potential trends and disruptions, in the AI ML space, particularly as it pertains to B2B product strategy. Any takes on that?
Sure. I mean, right now, AI is everywhere. I think every company right now needs to be evaluating how AI is either going to improve the products that they bring to market or their processes internally. And I think that there's going to be space for both. I think that AI also has a lot of hype. There's not a single company right now that you read about them and they're not saying, oh, we're using AI for things. I believe that it really is going to take time, and the product teams need to be very involved in stepping back and looking, what is the low-hanging fruit in terms of improving processes, productivity, but also where is AI really going to enable the company to dramatically improve the products that they are putting out or dramatically change how their customers have to interact with the product. So I would say there are going to be disruptions. There's no question about it. I think that what is interesting is some of the large companies were the first ones to jump on this trend, because I think that they know that they need to be the ones doing a lot of their internal disruption before quick startups come and change. I believe, like, this is just in my personal view, I think that there's a lot of opportunity when you start combining the capabilities of AI with acknowledging the concerns that enterprises have. So a lot of the concern around, is this data going to go out in the wild? And so the ability, companies that have their own data have an advantage. If they build their own models based on that data, they will have an advantage. So data becomes a big advantage, but also companies that are paying, startups that are paying attention to those concerns about security, about compliance that are so important for B2B businesses, I think that are also going to have some very interesting angles.
Yeah, I think it really resonated with our community. Like Tad was saying, everybody is embracing AI as the digital transformation journey. I really think that it's like the internet mobile trend, right? Like every company, every product has an app almost to like embrace that trend. So I wanted to go back to sort of the strategic leadership aspect that you mentioned earlier, because we got a couple of related questions from the community. So when it comes to making strategic decision, like the case where you push against the sales to kind of let go that big logo customer to focus on, hey, what is scalable for the product? But in some cases, you make sacrifices in order for the sales team to move forward, right? What are some of the parameters that you use to make decisions? What is kind of a framework that you go after?
So the framework for me, when I think of strategy and I think of product strategy, the analogy that I like is, think of it as you are on a trek to a distant mountain. Your vision is out there, this beautiful mountain. And along the way, you're figuring out what's the right path to take. And you see the mountain in the distance, but you need to be defining kind of how are you going to try to approach that mountain based on what you know now and what you expect to see around the next turn. So the way that I like to drive product strategy is you have this vision in mind, but then, and this goes back to aligning with business strategy, typically executive teams need to set out the business goals and business strategy, at least for the next year. So the executive team needs to align on what's most important. And those goals typically are specified in terms of business results. There may be a realization that you really need to improve net retention. Net retention is a key metric for a lot of B2B companies. You may be doing great with sales, but if you're churning a lot of customers, net retention may be one of your key goals. Sometimes there are goals related to compliance, PCI compliance. So there are going to be those big goals that the business will set. And then as a product leader, what you need to now do is see, what are the product outcomes that will best support those goals? So you start a bit from the top down with like, these are the most important things we need to be able to move. But then you also want empowered teams. So you want the teams now knowing what are the key outcomes that you would want, what would be the best initiatives and the levers to move. And when it comes to engineering capacity, and another thing that I think is very important to keep in mind is technical debt. If there's a goal to double the revenue because there's going to be double in sales, you immediately need to start saying, what will it take for our platform, for our product, to be able to support twice as many transactions? Are there pieces that are going to start breaking? And that's where product and engineering need to align and say, okay, where is, because then product needs to go back and say, we are going to separate some bandwidth for technical debt. So it really is this combination of tops down, these are the main goals, these are long-term vision, and bottoms up from the team saying, we know which initiatives will be the ones that have the best chance of really moving the levers that we need to move. And we know kind of where are other concerns in terms of the technical capabilities. And that's how you start prioritizing. I hope that this answers a little bit.
Yeah, I like the sort of top down and bottoms up approach to match. We do have a couple related question around like, okay, let's say it's important that we understand we need to align the vision. It's always harder, easier said than done, right? So are there specific practices, rituals, or processes you put in place as almost like a checkpoints, or how do you operationalize this kind of alignment?
Yes, so I think communication is pretty critical. There's been companies where I've joined as the product lead, and I find that there's no concept of kind of communicating what's the roadmap or providing visibility to the company. So that's a key thing. In many ways, again, with the idea that the executive team needs to provide guidance as to the main business goals for the next year, next 2 years, then what you need to be able to do as the product leader is say, okay, you need to communicate those goals to your engineering and product teams. You need to work with them, say, based on that, what are the initiatives? And then you need to go back and share with the rest of the company. And it's important, and somebody was asking about aligning the different functions. This is very important because when you have high-level business goals, you can imagine the client success team going and saying, okay, to improve net retention, we are just going to automate all these things that we do today. And they assume that product and engineering will invest in that. Meanwhile, product is going and saying, we're going to do this. So you actually need to circle back. And in one of the companies, in Lever, we had this great process where we would define what are the business goals. Each function, each group would go and come back with what they thought were the key initiatives, how they were going to allocate resources. And then we would have a readout with the leaders of the various functions and see if there were dependencies, if there were things that were inconsistent, where sales is saying we're going to go and sell into enterprise and product is saying the product is not ready for enterprise and we're not investing in that. That's the process. You do need to cycle back and align so that the goals that the various functions are putting together are not inconsistent with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I know 30 minutes always pass by so fast. So we're almost coming up on time. But I do want to ask a very, very, very important question, Laura, especially for all the, I think, women audience out there. But I think it's equally applicable sometimes to men, but maybe more so to women. I'm sure a lot of women are not surprised that we are often being perceived as not being very strategic. We're being really good at executing, given a task or a challenge, we're figuring out the problem, how to solve it, right? But not so much as being like a strategic thinker. What do you think is causing this perception gap? And what are some advice that you have for folks who are aspiring to take on like senior leadership roles in tech to kind of combat this kind of perception?
Yeah, if you Google women not being perceived as strategic, you'll find a lot of articles published about that. There is a true perception gap. And there are many different explanations of why that could be. Something that I've read, which is very interesting, is that famously Margaret Thatcher, when she was the prime minister in the UK, she said that in politics, if you want anything said, ask a man. If you want anything done, ask a woman. So women tend to have kind of are being famous for being very strong in execution, but that sometimes hurts them in terms of not being perceived as strategic. So I think that a couple of key things to do is just make sure that whenever you're communicating, women seem to be less self-confident than men in some occasions. So when you communicate, showing confidence and also setting the context before jumping into the details, setting the context, why is this relevant for the bigger picture? Presenting what you're presenting with confidence is one of the key things. The other one is, again, being very strong at execution is great, but you do need to be discerning. What are the things that, depending on the level you're in the organization, you should be delegating? You may be really good at doing it. You could do it faster than others, but maybe these are things that need to be delegated so that others can grow into that. And then you can spend some more time on more of the strategic discussion. So those are just a couple of the thoughts.
No, I love it. I think it resonated with the community as well. We probably need a whole separate session just to deep dive into some of that. But thank you so much, Laura. I think it's been really great learning for the community. So we do have a tradition at the end of our show. We ask a lightning round of questions to our speaker, which you can answer in 60 seconds or less each. Are you up for the challenge?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Drum roll. So the first question is, what is your current favorite product and why?
Oh, I'm a big hiker and I'm planning trips to go hiking. So All Trails is now my favorite product. I can look at all the possible trails wherever I'm going to go. And if you have the paid version, you can do a simulation of the trail and you can see how steep it is. And there's pictures. So I'm loving that product right now.
That's great. Yeah, I love the app as well. I'm not as much of a hiker, but whenever I do, that's my go-to. Second question. Who is your product role model? Who has been the most influential product leader in your career?
I'm going to answer the question about who's been the most influential in my career, but it's not a product leader. Early in my career, when I was at Nuance, I was working closely with the VP of Engineering and the VP of R&D. I had established a great relationship with them. And then when my boss decided to leave, it never occurred to me to ask for his position. Well, these two men were the ones who convinced the VP of Marketing that I was the right person to be the next director. And that really, really had an impact in my career because it gave me the confidence that as a woman, I really could kind of start moving into leadership. It also set the stage for what to me is excellent relationship with engineering. I mean, these two guys who I had a great relationship working with, they really kind of came and became my allies without me even knowing it. And so I have always learned that your relationship with engineering is absolutely critical. So I would say they were the two people who were the most influential early on in my career.
That's awesome. Good to know. Always learning from each other too. Doesn't have to be a product leader. What is one final piece of advice or resource that you wanted to share with the community who are aspire to be a product leader?
So there's so many resources right now for improving your product management skills. But my recommendation would be, as you go up in your career, start learning outside of the pure product management skill set. One book that I like, it's called High Growth Handbook by Elad Gil. You want to start being more knowledgeable about how to scale a company, not just how to scale your function. You want to be better at understanding financial pieces. So that would be my recommendation. Start expanding beyond purely product management skills and learn more about the overall business.
This is great. Thank you so much, Laura. We're getting a lot of love in the live comments. This is an amazing session. A lot of your points resonated with the audience, bringing the team together, elevating them, having clear communication, providing the context, putting the big picture together. Right. Thank you, Laura. Love all around, not just women, right? Like men learn a lot too. So I'm not trying to discriminate. And thank you so much again for sharing your lessons and insights. So we're really grateful grateful for your time. And folks, if you enjoyed this conversation, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, which you can find a link in the events details tab. We will send out 5 key takeaways from our conversation with Laura next Wednesday, and then also for future events updates. So thank you so much again, Laura, for joining us. And thank you, folks, for dialing in. All right. See you next week.
Bye.